I know that the Halifax explosion devastated the north end of the city of Halifax. Some buildings were spared miraculously. Our building, the Five Fishermen, was one of them. It has always had a reputation for hauntings, and I had never necessarily put any credence in the stories that I had heard, but definitely since having a couple of experiences myself, I've changed my mind when it comes to what goes on at the Five Fishermen.
The Halifax explosion was the biggest disaster in Canada's history. Without any warning, 2,000 people died, more than a quarter of them children. Hello, I'm Lawrence Chow. Our experts say ghostly sightings frequently occur where there's been catastrophic loss of life. A lot of confused spirits who don't know they're dead continue to wander. Tragic, especially if they're children. Today, we meet two Halifax women who say they've seen ghosts from the explosion. It's been a heart-rending experience for both of them. The restaurant where Sandra Gardiner works was a morgue at the time of the explosion. And years later, one of its deceased occupants starts reaching out to her.
One evening, while closing, another staff member and I had gone downstairs to check our sister restaurant, and as we were performing some cleanup duties, I guess, the inside doors slowly creeped open and then swung back. There was no breeze, there wasn't any reason for that door to have opened. Leonard and I were looking at each other. We saw this together. We were dumbfounded. After the initial shock of actually seeing something like that, it was funny. I guess it was kind of funny. Yeah, we saw that. It just confirmed for us. It maybe even made us feel better in the end, that we weren't crazy. And I think that was because there was two of us seeing it together, that we felt secure in that. It wasn't more comforting, but it certainly was something that we didn't even try to explain away, because we both witnessed it. We knew that it had happened. There was one evening that I was in our private dining room performing some duties. And I had heard my name being called, and there was no one in that area of the restaurant. I didn't really give it any kind of credence whatsoever. I just thought I had misheard. Continuing on with my duties, probably 5 minutes later, my name was called again. At which point I thought, that's staff. I went into the area of the restaurant that I thought the voice came from. There was absolutely nobody else in that part of the building but myself. I was definitely alone. Now, the third time I heard my name was a little while later, and I knew I was alone downstairs. I said out loud, that's gotta be a fan or a piece of machinery in the kitchen that's on a cycle. And then every time it hits a cycle, it sounds like my name. Those words weren't out of my mouth, and my full name was said, Sandra Lynn. I was scared. I ran. I knew that it was unworldly. was one evening that I was in our private dining room performing some duties. I had heard my name being called, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now, the 3rd time I heard my name, my full name was said, Sandra Lynn. I was scared. I ran. I knew that it was unworldly. It frightened me to the point where I left the building in a hurry. I then felt that, man, did I really hear that? Did that really happen? Come on, Sandy. It's the end of the night. You know, you're tired. Did that really, really happen? And I have to say it did. The night that I actually saw something was a night that I was closing the restaurant. I was in the office doing up our caches, decided that at that time I should go and check our washrooms for faucets running, whatnot, something we must do every day. And propped the door open, saw a very strange light, turned my head, looked down, and saw the image of a little girl whose eyes were absolutely fixed on me, and they were the saddest eyes I have ever seen in my life. She must have been a little girl of 7, 8, 9. I wasn't frightened for some reason. I held on to the end of the counter and tried to steady myself. I closed my eyes, I opened my eyes, she was there. I closed my eyes, I opened my eyes, she was gone. I stayed in the washroom for probably 2 or 3 minutes. I did not run out of the washroom. I still can't tell you why I wasn't frightened. And as I was leaving the building that night, I felt horrible for leaving her behind. I wanted to take her home. But I, of course, couldn't. I really felt like that little girl was trapped at the Five Fishermen. It took me a long time to actually talk about it because it was sad. It wasn't scary, it was sad. It was really sad. I'm gonna cry because it was really sad. I can't tell you why the little girl would still be lingering in the restaurant other than she isn't able to get to where she's supposed to go. And why she showed herself to me, I have no idea. Because it wasn't like I was truly open to that or looking for that. I mean, maybe her mother had survived the Halifax explosion and the little girl didn't. Or perhaps, I don't know. I don't know. I know that she was sad, and I can only imagine that a little girl of that age is sad because her mom isn't with her to protect her, to care for her. She's caught between 2 worlds. And it breaks my heart. I think about her daily. I wish I knew how she was, who she was, if she's still there. I don't look for her at the Five Fishermen necessarily. I wouldn't be disappointed if I saw her again. But part of me doesn't want to. Part of me does not need to see the sadness in that little girl's eyes again, ever.
Sandra's reaction to the little girl is intense. Our expert Dina Bain-Taylor suggests her maternal instinct likely kicked in, so her ghostly encounter didn't scare her. Instead, it tore at her heartstrings. As a young mother living in the city's north end, the part that was flattened by the explosion, Sandra Church has plenty of maternal instinct herself, and that gives her a special connection to a ghost she sees out her window one night.
Well, I first got married in Halifax in '67, and my husband and I moved to a place, an area called the Hydrostone Buildings. And it was built after the Halifax Explosion from material that was sent up from Boston. So we moved in, and I had my son. And one day when my son was about probably coming up a year old, I experienced seeing this apparition. I was upstairs in the front of the house and put my son to bed. I heard a sound outside the window, and it was like a wailing, and I think that the Irish call it keening. It's just a sound that you never hear, usually, except it was someone in deep sorrow. I looked out the window, and as usual, in Halifax, there was a thick fog. And I looked down, and I could see a woman, and she looked distraught. It's etched in my mind because it was just so overwhelming, the feeling that went with it. It was the early part of December, and it was a foggy night, very heavy fog, as is usual in Halifax. And I was upstairs in the front of my house and put my son to bed. And I heard a wailing, a very high, sad noise. I did think that someone was in trouble out on the street, or lost or been hurt. And I looked down, and I could see a woman, and she looked distraught. I guess you could say it looked eerie. It just looked as if it wasn't really happening, but it was. I could hear the sadness in her voice, and I could hear her crying, and she was holding out her hands and saying, "My baby, my baby." And she was looking about, and she was so sad that it broke your heart to see how sad she was. And I thought, what is this? Why is she doing that? And slowly it dawned on me that this probably wasn't an alive person, and that she was certainly injured, and I felt like I was being told something, shown something. She looked to be about 30-ish or younger. She wasn't a teenager. She had bare feet, and the dress was torn in places and muddied, and her hair was hanging in her face all disheveled, and she was wet, as if she'd been in a rain or a snowstorm. It felt to me like this was unfinished business for her. Something had happened, and she needed to find her baby. I don't think anybody could have alleviated her suffering. I think her pain was in her time, and no one could have made her feel better or anything like that. And then the fog rolled in again, and she just disappeared. And there was a feeling of sadness in the air. I thought about my son, and I thought, oh my heavens, what a sad thing to lose your baby. I think that her hair and her clothing being muddied, and the no shoes on her feet in the winter, to me was a sort of, she'd been in a disaster. Something very sad had happened to her suddenly. I researched the Halifax explosion a little after living in that area, And what I know is that it happened in 1917. There were two ships. One of them was an ammunition ship, and they hit each other, and it just so happens it was positioned so it just blew the north end of Halifax flat and then did a lot of damage otherwise. It was December 6th, and it was really cold, and I believe there was a big snowstorm that happened right after that, so it was like hell for them, I think. A lot of people disappeared, of course. People lost their families, wives, their husbands, their children. Children lost their parents. When you start walking around, say, the old graveyards or the old churches, there's always some little reminder of it, so it's part of our history. I was still feeling the sadness. There was a rush of sadness in the air. And of course, I had a baby. My son was just a newborn, more or less. And I thought, oh, that's to feel the loss of your child like that after a disaster. It must have been really sad. She was so sad and so lost. I had a sense that she had unfinished business, and she was still looking, and she didn't know that the explosion had been happening. She just was there still looking. When I went to get my son out of his bed, I felt real concern for him and a fear for him in a way, and really sad that someone should have to spend their lives or their afterlife wandering looking for their own child. But I don't think it would have stuck with me so long if it hadn't been important. If I got anything out of the encounter, I believe that it helped my empathy grow stronger, because it was like looking at somebody and seeing through their eyes, feeling their pain, I guess, and thinking, oh, I'm blessed I still have my child, and there's been no great disaster that I've had to live through. The feeling of sadness made me feel connected to her, having a newborn, a young baby, and someone looking for their child. Where's my baby? Was not only looked sad, but there was a wash of sadness through the house, through the window. And I also felt a sense of being a part of something that was very special. I think that things like this go on, but not everybody gets to see it. I think that if we're visited by spirits of people who have gone on, I think that that's why they come back for unfinished business. Might want to take care of somebody or make amends in some way. And when I started to look at how things happen and why things happen, I could understand it better, and I understood better my own reaction. I was involved in my life, and it was just something that happened. But I don't think it would have stuck with me so long if it hadn't been important. And I've always counted it as a blessing for me that I could see this happen. I wouldn't like to think that she's spending all this time and maybe longer wandering. I hope that she found her baby, or there was something that made closure for her, and she could travel on to wherever our souls go.
Children want comfort and affection. Our experts say if there are ghostly children, they would be no different. Our subjects recognized the spirits they encountered needed solace because of their heartbreaking losses in the Great Explosion. Both women were deeply affected by the experience, and as a result, found the world was a richer place. though they weren't able to help the ghosts, perhaps in the end, it was the ghosts that helped them.
I learned a lot from that experience. I learned empathy. I learned that unseen things can come and go in your life if you don't pay attention. And I guess I learned I had a certain sensitivity to things that are going on around me. It certainly made me more aware of the things that were around me.
Up until then, I may have believed in ghosts, in spirits, but I didn't necessarily believe they were always hanging out at the Five Fishermen. But I do now.
For more ghostly encounters, go to myviva.ca/ghostly encounters.